Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas, recording a historic episode of Profiles in Risk. After over 550 episodes today, because of travel, traffic, and general delays, especially getting out of Atlanta with bad weather today, this is the first episode of Profiles ever recorded in a parked car. If there's any sound or video issues, you know why. Today I have with me Cyrus Karai, CEO at CoverForce. Cyrus, thank you for joining me today. How's it going?
Thank you for having me, Tony. I'm not in a car, but I am out in New York and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So, uh, we are recording on May 10th. I happen to be sitting on the parking lot for the inaugural InsurTech Atlanta. And I'm heading back to New York in June for InsurTech Insights New York. So hopefully you guys will be there.
Yeah.
So May 10th in New York, you're probably in the time of the year where it's just beautiful. Like it's not like the dog days of summer yet, and it's no longer cold. So this is like spring in New York, I'm guessing.
It's definitely shorts, pollen, sun's out, guns out kind of weather, as we say in Australia.
Okay, fantastic. We always give the guest a chance to give the elevator pitch. What is CoverForce?
Sure. Uh, you know, CoverForce at the end of the day is about strengthening the agency. What we are is a infrastructure layer in the insurance industry that really connects the insurance carriers to whomever they want to distribute insurance in the P&C market, specifically in the commercial insurance market is where CoverForce is focused now. So as an example, when we started working on CoverForce, we recognized that a lot of the large distributors of insurance, your agency networks, agencies, as you can hear in the background, there's a lot of police sirens because I'm here in New York. But we recognize that there's a lot of large groups that still interact with their underwriter, the insurance carrier, via cord form, via email submission, or in this hard market, really they're still filling out applications one by one by one. In addition to that, there is a lot of distributors out in the market, that are alternative ones who, like let's say the insurance agencies that are attached to banks, who still have to collect a customer information again in a very offline manner, phone calls, emails. And we said there has to be a better way of doing business. And that way of doing business exists today. It exists in Australia, in the UK, in India, and across areas of Europe as well. So we said, as a CoverForce, how can we work with carriers to help them digitize their access point to agents, brokers, banks, whomever? And that's what CoverForce is. CoverForce is a unified API that lets you access multiple of the leading insurance carriers. We were able to obtain partnerships with several of the leading carriers, including Travelers, Liberty Mutual, Nationwide, Chubb, AmTrust, Employers, Great American. In many cases, we even help carriers by building the technology with them. So we listen to them, hear their problems, and then we actually deploy our resources to actually help them build out that digital experience for their agents and brokers. And then we provide it as a unified access point. So if someone wants to access a carrier tomorrow, they know that they can access them with the carrier's permission instantly, as opposed to waiting a long time for an integration or being told that they don't meet the requirements to get prioritized for an integration.
Fantastic. And I've got to say, we have been recording profiles for so long that I remember back in the day when Nick Tamparelli was running it and I was just a co-host. Whenever we didn't even have a word for InsurTech. And whenever somebody used the word API referring to working with carriers, we could immediately go ahead and ask, so what is it like working with Hiscox? Because they were the only carrier that was API ready, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. It started getting better and better. But then there was a period where platforms would only really be connected with the brand new carriers. So it's like we have API connections to Lemonade and to Hippo,
Yes.
but not to traditional players. So the fact that you're already piped in with Travelers, Liberty, Nationwide, Employers, Great American. We're talking awesome traditional carriers.
Yes.
So just the industry has come a long way. That's super exciting. Okay. So number two, very interesting. We do a few interviews here and there with some insurtechs abroad, but I've always worked the U.S. market. So for me, it's kind of fascinating that Australia, India, Europe are ahead of us on the digitalization of small commercial. Why, given that you're from Australia, at least compared to Australia, why is that? Why are those international markets ahead of the US when it comes to
Yeah, and I'll preface this by saying, I've had the opportunity when I was younger that I lived in Australia. I worked in London, and I even spent a lot of time in India, which is why I was kind of familiar with how insurance operates there. I would say, it's not specifically a thing that's remote to insurance. It exists in the banking industry in a lot of parts. Is you see markets like India where people don't even go to desktop computers. The first time they interact is with mobile. In Australia, often it's a case that the insurance carriers are pushed because of regulation to ensure APIs are built out. And often it's a case where, in the UK, again, a lot of carriers just say, well, we have to transact in a certain way because that's what our customer demands. Now, America has its own unique dynamics. A lot of insurance is sold through agents, brokers. A lot of the way of doing business has been there for a lot longer because the U.S. insurance industry is a lot more historic and revered than the Australian one. The tech stacks are different because of that. A lot of insurance carriers are built on legacy tech stacks that have worked for in the case of Travelers, well over a century. Um, and really, that's one of the things is, I think the insurance carriers have a desire, they have an interest. Like you said, APIs weren't a thing from what we gathered, like not even 10 years ago. In fact, one of our co-founders, Behram Dinshaw, who he at the time was the head of small middle commercial at Travelers. Today, he's actually the president of Farmers. He was one of the people who was knocking on the door all the time, attending conferences saying we need more API development in the industry. And realistically, I think that's where a lot of carriers recognize they need to go. It's just often thinking, well, how do you move, a ship? And I think in the last 5, 6 years, you've seen a huge change, not just in prioritization, but also resource allocation of carriers to building out their API stack.
All right. Okay. So first of all, I'm blown away that regulators in Australia push the industry to API. Because here we're a heavily regulated industry is our favorite excuse to, and maybe not anymore, but it's our favorite excuse to why we were so far behind before the insurtech revolution of the last 10 years dragged us kicking and screaming for survival into modernizing our technology, right? And now we're kind of through that process. So amazing. All right. So basically, to do what you guys are doing, you need to have the carriers hooked up on one side.
Yes.
You need to have distribution on the other side. Okay. So I come from the carrier space. I'm a former middle market underwriter and a former small commercial underwriter before that. So I speak carrier. Okay. So if if I'm a carrier that's not yet on the platform, why do I want to be on the platform?
Sure. So, I think, like you said earlier, if I can reference something you said about, when APIs were developed, the first thing you'd say is, well, what's it like to work with Hiscox? Because the legacy players didn't really interact. I would say one of the challenges we faced is we said, well, if we truly want to build what are the pipes of the insurance industry and really enable that better communication of data between agents, brokers, the biggest distribution partner, who often insurtechs ignore or they try to leapfrog over and say, no, let's just go direct to consumer. We said as CoverForce, one, we want to cater to that demographic because that demographic is really the one that the largest insurance carriers, the legacy players, the Travelers, Liberties, Nationwides care about because they know that they place a lot of business through agents and brokers. It's like 88% of the market is independent agents. And then the rest of it is actually a composite of captive agents and direct to consumer, which direct to consumer is said to be less than 5% of the commercial insurance distribution market. So when it came to working with carriers, the carriers said, well, if you are working with our large partners, and we went off and we actually ended up getting partnership agreements with a few of the large distribution. We ended up working with ISU Network, the second largest network of independent agents in America. They distribute about $8.5 billion plus of PNC premiums in the market. They essentially said, we want digital innovation. They worked with the carriers and us to say, let's build it together as one use case. And then the carriers very quickly realized as well that this is a use case that's generally applicable to other brokers, to banks, to payroll companies. And that's kind of how we went in that direction.
All right. Okay. So what's the integration like?
So the integration,
Given
you
that
can imagine, it's like
our
everyone is
systems are probably
different. No
not.
one talks to each other.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's the reason why CoverForce exists, right? Is if everything was on a uniform standard, like for instance, in the US, they've regulated the banks to the point where banks have to build towards a form of open banking standard. That really doesn't exist in insurance, and realistically, it can't exist because the API of an insurance carrier is actually their underwriting API. It's more commercially sensitive than the transacting or the balance checking API of a bank. So when you integrate with a carrier, often the formats are very different. Some
Okay.
use JSON, some use XML. I would say the way they structure their payloads are different. Often it's a case of the features and functionalities that exist within an API are also different. So, for instance, we have certain carriers that publicly are not known to have an API, but they probably have one of the most sophisticated APIs in the market because they've been under development for the last 5-6 years. We've got another carrier who essentially has an API, but they don't have things like the ability to refer it to an underwriter or the ability to bind instantly now. Every carrier is a little different, but I would say one thing that we've kind of helped every one of our carrier integration partners to achieve is that they deliver a bindable quote through our API. So it's not indicative, which frustrated agents and brokers and
Absolutely.
banks. I mean, it exists, and I think everyone knows that. Every agent listening and every carrier listening probably says to themselves, like, God, like indicative quoting is just it's a fool's thing, because in this hard market, indicative quoting means you have to go onto the carrier website, fill out a lot more underwriting questions, and then you get told actually it's a decline, or it's a price which is 20-30% different from what you're expecting as an agent or broker, when all an agent and broker want is speed to market. It's to get it to their customers and say, hey, I want you to go with this quote from Travelers, and they return a quote, very quickly. And I know that that policy and product is a right fit for your business.
So it sounds like you made the choice very very much so that like you basically could go, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing that you could go more carriers, but not every quote is bindable, and we create the same frustration that has existed before, or we only put the carriers where we can have a bindable quote, which is what we should have. My God, right? like,
Yeah.
like
I
what is
mean,
the value, especially in small
I,
commercial? Small
I would,
commercial
yeah.
is so speed driven. Anyway,
I
continue.
would say, that kind of gives us a lot of, gives CoverForce a lot more, makes us seem a lot more impressive than it is. I think what we said is we realized that there was a demand from carriers. The carriers recognized the need for it. Because they listened to their agents and brokers who said, this is what we need, this is what we want. I think CoverForce just became a partner that carriers could use. And we have actually partnerships with carriers where we even help build out their tech stacks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's because we have that trust relationship. The carrier said, listen, maybe we aren't bindable right now. And we said, right, that's fine. It's not the right time to be integrated with CoverForce, but why don't we give you some best practices? And over the next couple of months, let's build towards there together, and we'll make sure you're building efficiently. And so we kind of have helped carriers get up to that stage. So that way, the carriers that are on our platform today, all of them offer bindable pricing. Even Travelers, which when we started at the time didn't do it, now does it with a CoverForce.
That's amazing. So, um, from the agency perspective, from the distribution perspective, so you're happy to play with all sorts of agents, uh, right, massive networks, a bank owned, et cetera, et cetera. Um, if I'm an agency, or if I'm SIAA or the independent agency, down the street, so like the two extremes of the agency space, uh, why should I? Uh, and before I ask that, uh, who pays for it? What's the revenue model?
Yeah, is so I guess the first thing is the revenue model who pays. It's a situation where from our perspective, it's both sides pay a little bit and it kind of
Okay.
reduces the burden on both sides.
Okay.
The carriers often contribute because they recognize that it's an investment in their technology stack. We also significantly streamline the sales side and reduce the number of field reps needed in order to market to a group like ISU or SIAA. And then from a broker side, they are typically incurring a cost, which is pretty standard in the market, to just
Mm-hmm.
access the platform. Now, typically, CoverForce is a bit unique. We work for enterprise solutions, so we work with the network leadership or the wholesale leadership or the top 100 brokers, their management, and we're bought by the enterprise level, and they disseminate it across their entire organization. We also feed them best practices of how to market it, how to talk to it. We have the carriers engage with us on the appetite, and we disseminate it across their user base. Our view is that as a software, our core is about helping the enterprise become more efficient in placement and ultimately push more business towards what we know as preferred relationships. So it's not about pushing business towards every carrier. It's about saying, hey, I as you know XYZ brokerage recognize that I should be pushing business to these six carriers that I want a stronger relationship. The carrier recognizes that they are offering often better incentive structures, or they have a good relationship, and they want to ensure a more seamless experience for those agents. And CoverForce just provides that mechanism to communicate between the agent and the carrier. And then I would say the other thing is, as a company, we want to really pave the way for what we believe is the next wave of technology to be built on top, whether it's, you want to build applications on top of CoverForce. So people want to build, embedded experiences, or they want to build their own version of, let's say we have people who come to us through carrier referral, actually, which they've approached Amtrust and said, we want to spin up a digital brokerage catered towards a specific demographic in the market, like parcel delivery drivers. They can know that they can get up and running tomorrow, within a couple of weeks, they'll be integrated with CoverForce. We just even integrated one of the top 5 AMS systems in the market, now Certs, which wanted to build their own comparative rating tool for their 1,700 agencies nationwide. They saw that if they were to do the integrations directly themselves, it would have been a situation where they would have had to stand up, 20 engineers, wait often months, if not years, for certain carriers to give them permission to even do the integration. And then ultimately, it would have been a situation where time to market would have been 2-3 years away. They started the integration in the middle of Jan, and they were piloting with a group of agencies by March. And I believe they've even done a public announcement about their launch now. So it's the idea is speed to market, build applications, really start selling insurance, but it's the agent or broker that just is able to digitally communicate more efficiently with the carrier.
All right. All right. Um, okay. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding, but you don't play at the retail level. So like, if I'm a independent, that's agency, that does commercial, that doesn't go through a big aggregator, can I access CoverForce?
Well, the aggregator tends to give out the software, either software we build, because one of the parts of CoverForce is we have our API, but we also have custom solutions that we actually build. Because a lot of cases, what we found is that you approach a large enterprise group, like a large brokerage, a large network, they are great at selling insurance, but they could use a little help when it comes to the engineering aspect of it. And that's where Comfort steps in, says, we've got the API built. You can take it and power your own proprietary solutions and know you can get instant access to leading markets. or we can work with you and actually build on top of it a software solution application that's accessible on the web, so that way you can get quoting tomorrow. We've built those for actually carriers, so multiple actually carriers that are available on our available through our API are also customers of ours. So there's certain situations where agents, retail agents nationwide, believe they're accessing a certain carrier in terms of the agent portal. It's actually something built by CoverForce. It's just we haven't we don't we're white labeled and we don't do any branding. It's all custom for that carrier, but
Interesting.
we just ensure that the carrier knows that they can execute more efficiently, they can get to market ASAP, and we're happy to provide that best practices in engineering and just that certainty that we'll execute for you. And it's not going to be some crazy project in tech that runs 2 years and hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars over budget. We kind of like to be very focused and deliver, and that's our reputation, I think.
All right. All right. Um, I'm curious about the competitors in this space. And
Yeah,
if you're not comfortable with the question, we can cut it out afterwards.
not at all.
So I mean, there's a lot of insurtechs out there. So even for me, it's hard to keep track. But the
Yeah.
one that seems closest to what you guys are doing is Bolt Penguin. So do tell me if I'm wrong. How does it compare with the Bolt Penguin marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very apt observation. I think Ball Penguin is definitely in many ways seen as, one of the first movers in this market. I would say the only one that was probably earlier than them in my eyes is Cover Wallet.
Hmm.
Cover Wallet was building at a time where APIs didn't really exist. And even Ball Penguin, when they started, I think from what I've learned from talking to people who are early investors or early members of their founding team, it was something where they were really in the Wild West doing things when carriers just weren't ready. And I think CoverForce came at a time when carriers actually, probably because of Ball Penguin and Cover Wallet, said, "Hey, actually, this is where things are going, and this is how we need to be doing business. So let's invest a lot of more money in it." I would say the way we think of us is differently. Is Ball Penguin, owned by American Family now, is very much catered to the retail agency. So typical retail agents would go to Bold Penguin and say, "Hey, I want to access Bold Penguin certain markets." Bold Penguin, of course, being a wholesaler, they also are ones where they provide market access to all these retail agents nationwide. But if you think about all the other wholesalers in the market, your Empires, your Foundation Risk Partners, your 180s, or your like Brooks or Venbrook, your international underwriters, all these are wholesalers who don't have their own platform. They want to offer the same level of feature and functionality that Bold Penguin as a wholesaler gives out to so many agents nationwide. These wholesalers also have hundreds, if not thousands, of retail agents who submit to them monthly, but they don't have a digital platform to actually support that, to actually enable a digital communication. They still get submissions via an Accord form or via an email. Why shouldn't they be delivered the same kind of technology? But I'd say we like to think we take it a step further is because we came a little bit later than Bold Penguin. We offer things like bindable quoting. So your traveler's API is a bindable quote experience. Your ability to access nationwide is a bindable experience. And we have a few other legacy carriers that they don't have, just because as an independent player, carriers are more willing to engage with us as opposed to if we were to come away as like as if I was agency A telling a carrier you should integrate with me. I think carriers deep down don't want to have their technology just kept in-house by one entity. They would like to know that there's the ability for it to spread out across their other distribution partners if they want to do that. And CoverForce offers that kind of functionality. So I'd say, Bold Penguin is a model, which I think is phenomenal and a leader in the market, what they do. CoverForce thinks of it as like, we are focused on everyone that isn't Bold Penguin, who has a similar model of being a wholesaler or a network and really wants to give it out to all these agents. Because realistically, like if you take, for instance, ISU, of their 240 agencies, one of them was, I believe, at the end of the day, or two of them were Bold Penguin customers. None of those agents used any comparative rating tools. The question is why? 240 of some of the largest agencies in America, and why were they not able to access any rating tool in the market? And that's where we started. We
Right.
said, how do we make sure we build something that a network like ISU can adopt? And then the carrier said, well, hey, this is the same problem that so many other networks are going through, so many other wholesalers are going through. One of the carriers ended up paying us to build something custom for the wholesale market, and we ended up building a solution that was essentially something which we then give out to wholesalers and offer them a solution.
All right. Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Uh, I'm always curious on the origin story. How, how did you realize that this was something that was needed in the insurance industry and that you were the right people to do it?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a little. I mean, my initial background is I actually consulted for a while on in Europe on carriers when they were building out APIs there. But my story is a little bit corny. I'd come to America to do my master's. I was doing my MBA at Wharton, and COVID had hit, and the world had gone quiet. And I really just, I was an insurance auditor at PwC before I was a consultant. I knew that that was the area I kind of found myself not by choice going into, but then once you're in it, you're just like, you just like it for whatever reason. I think familiarity breeds also like love of an
Uh-huh.
industry and also understanding of the complexities. And often I would talk to agents and brokers and even people as large as like senior management of some of the top 20 brokers I would engage with, and we'd kind of commiserate about why things were a certain way and couldn't be different, and our vision for the world. And I realized a lot of people had the same vision for the world. So I really went out during COVID. I did MBA, of course, at the time when people do a lot of drinking and traveling. So I found myself in places like Oregon and of course Philadelphia and you know wherever and I would just door knock on the doors of these different agencies, and then I'd also door knock on barbershops and ask them like, how do you buy insurance? How do you want to buy insurance? What would you like? What do you use? What do you not use? Why don't you use this software? And I think I literally surveyed like a good 200 plus people, if not more. And I think then I was engaging a lot with Beram, my co-founder, who was at Travelers at the time. He of course was aware that there was a lot of large networks and brokers who he'd engaged with over years who'd said we kind of need something, but maybe we don't have the ability internally in terms of resources to build it ourselves. And I think that's kind of where it came. Is we said I got connected with TJ Ryan, the CEO of ISU. TJ, I think, is a very big innovator in the industry. He's pushed a lot of interesting technology forward. He actually ISU. I don't want to be misquoted, but I think ISU was the place where, and I don't know. Actually, maybe it's something that's a bit confidential. But basically, two of the large um, personal lines digital distributors were actually incubated within ISU as agencies, and then went off and they become very big insurtechs actually. But he's kind of got a reputation of being a little bit more avant-garde as CEOs go. He said, "Let's do it, thumbs up," and we scoped it out for a year and a half, built it together. And I think having someone senior in the industry so invested in you and so much support that the ISU team gave behind us and saying, well, this is something we know the industry needs, and we're willing to commit the time and effort and our own personal resources to make it something that can exist in the industry was really what led to us existing.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
And I will say that, ISU doesn't own a stake in us and they've never asked for one. But, to have a company like that just champion technology is phenomenal, I think.
That's fantastic. How did you connect with him? Was ISU one of the did you knock the door to ask?
Actually, it's funny because you're at a conference right now, and Beram at Travelers at the time was actually at a conference and on a panel with TJ next to him, and they'd known of each other for a fair bit, of course, as people in the insurance industry do, because it's a small world. And Beram just had a conversation with TJ saying, I'm working with this guy named Cyrus, and we'd just like to have a chat because the problems we're talking about. It was actually a panel, I believe, on APIs and digital enablement, and they said, let's have a conversation and let's just hear what ISU is interested in, what it wants to be as a group, and that's really how it started at a
Fantastic.
conference.
Uh, for the listeners, if you are an insurance employee, a traditional carrier or broker employee, who, because of the type of your role, don't get a lot of opportunities to go to a lot of conferences to represent your company, budget for it, make the time for it. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, maybe you don't want to pay $2,500 plus hotel and travel to go to ITC, which is the best, but at least go to your local insurtech meetup, right? And maybe you can swing a ticket to insurtech Hartford, or right, whatever medium size.
And
uh
also, maybe I shouldn't say this publicly, but my little cheat trick is, we're a startup for many years. I mean, we just got uh, venture funding, in 2022 to really build everything. But while I was a student and I couldn't afford to really, go to Money 2020 and ITC and all those things myself, I can't spend that kind of money. And also the flights and all that, and the hotels, and so like we used to go, a group of us, and sleep in one hotel room
oh yeah.
together and go. But on top of that, like I would just email, and I still do it to this day. I'm not embarrassed to admit it. Is even with funding, like I still email certain conferences and say, "Hey, listen, we're still a startup. Is there anything you can do? Like, please." And you know what? People are understanding, and I think I actually I had start me and one other person, we actually created the fintech conference at Wharton, the first one in
Oh,
2021.
awesome.
And you learn, like, also a lot of times these conferences are pretty high revenue generating items for the whoever owns them. So you realize, like, it's if they hear of someone, they'll typically give. I used to give out free tickets for Wharton's, and I've known
For
people.
Yes, this is amazing, absolutely amazing. So for the listener, this is a quick a parenthesis, but for the listener, if you are constantly envious of all the conferences that I go to, please, yes, ask. If you're a student, take advantage of that, absolutely. If you're a startup, ask, and also realize that the revenue model of most conferences, the profit center are the sponsors, not
Yes, yes,
not the regular tickets, right?
yes.
The $800 to $1,200 tickets, uh, it's not what they make their money on. Hopefully, they cover their costs, but they probably do. But really, the $200,000, $300,000 sponsorship for for a booth, or what, the 50 grand for a booth, uh that I don't know, my friend Amber used to run marketing for Bold Penguin, the year that they sponsored ITC, and they were all over the place.
The one where they had the bus, was that the one?
It was
Yeah,
really like the whole thing
phenomenal,
was, and
phenomenal.
she has never shared. She's probably still under NDA, so she's never told me how much they spent on that. But that's what the conferences make their money on, that kind of sponsorship, right? So it is not that hard to get a free or discounted ticket. And by the way, people, insurance nerds is always looking for content. So tell them that you're with insurance nerds and that you want to write an article or make a video, or something. We'll back you up.
I used to do that too. I was for a while. I was the co-head of the Wharton FinTech podcast,
Uh-huh.
and I used to go. I even used to use like as soon as you say you're pressed, they're like, "Sure, free
Yeah,
ticket."
no, no, and
Um,
you do have to deliver. You have to do something
of
for them.
course, of course.
Right? But right, like, yes, like, get
And
creative about it. Awesome.
I think that's I will say that I think one thing I've noticed about the insurance industry, and I think it's true what we're talking about at conferences with anything, which is as you become a bigger entity, my hope is that CoverForce one day becomes in a position where we then start sponsoring, giving back, like many insurance carriers sponsor InsurTech Insights, or InsurTech Tampa, where you're at. And the idea is then you also invest, like these insurance companies are willing to invest in their time and effort and resources into tech companies, and grow the market. And I think that's where things eventually progress.
Awesome. So let me bring it back to the conversation about CoverForce. Kind of bring it back home. Um, are there any features? By the way, this episode will probably go live June 17th, so a little bit over a month. Are there any features that are on the way for CoverForce that you can already
Yeah.
talk about?
So I would say one thing that firstly makes us very unique in the market, and this is my first time doing a live podcast, so please bear with me, everyone listening. But what makes us unique is we do quote and bind. It's not just bindable quoting. It's actually like you can instantly bind with several of the leading carriers in the market. That makes us, I found, quite unique, is being an independent player in the market,
Mhm.
that we are not tied to any agency or broker, and we will work with whoever would like to be worked, or who, if you have an appointment with any of the carriers, and we even help facilitate that in many cases. We're here to just provide you an access point that's easy to integrate with and gets you up and running ASAP. We have things that we consistently bring to the market, things like instant appetite guides, and and it's probably it's weird to say this, but I know in many cases carriers have told us that we actually have a more accurate appetite guide than Ask Kodiak, just because we integrate with their APIs directly. But that's not shading Ask Kodiak. Ask Kodiak's
No, no,
amazing.
they're an OG. Uh,
Please, yeah, I think
they're an OG, and they exited, so they are quite happy
they're
now.
an OG, and that's, you have to respect for the OGs. I've always said that.
No,
They make it, it's on. Yeah.
ask Kodiak especially, and I am not close friends with any of them. I do know them, but I'm not like close friends with any of them. But what they built, so simple, and
Yeah.
it's used by so many others.
So many people.
So yes, absolute respect for how they did it. Anyway, continue.
And yeah, and as a insurtech, your mission is obviously to be just as impactful. But I would say that we are really focused on, I think, as I said, quoting and binding experience, quote bind issuance experience, building deeper with carriers. I think what you're going to see from CoverForce is really a lot more carriers come into the mix that maybe didn't have those capabilities. So we work with a number of carriers where we are, as I said, helping build out their API stack. That's really exciting for us, and it's something which it involves a lot of trust, and we're very, we're very excited for that. I think that's what's going to come in stores, and also new lines, new products, and I think that should be. There's definitely some exciting new products coming out in cover for us that are going to be transactable products,
Yeah,
where people before didn't think they could be transactable or bindable. So we're pretty excited for H2 this year, actually.
oh
I don't
wow.
want to give it away, but it's
Yeah,
stuff that you can
products
imagine. Like many of the
products
carriers were in
that
one
are,
product, they see us as being another product.
yeah, so products that are not thought of as instantly bindable. That's
Yeah, we're very excited.
there's a good couple thousand carriers in the US, and if I had to guess, probably 500 to 800 of them do a small commercial. So you got your work cut out for you.
I wouldn't say we're going after everyone or talking to everyone. It's only helping certain kind of carriers.
Makes sense.
One.
Makes sense. Cyrus, thank you so much for your time today, and for your patience with my, my logistics today. It's been super interesting, really awesome stuff. When this goes live, I will tag you on the company on LinkedIn, and look forward to see you at ITC and maybe at Insurtech Insights or whatever.
Oh yes, I'll be actually on stage at that one, which is exciting. So I look forward to seeing you all there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care.